Welcome, action fans. I'm Adrian, your host, and get ready for another hit of addictive action right here on the Action Hero podcast.
Yeah.
Today,
Oh, yeah?
we are going to be strapping in for Ghostwire.
Oh, I love this one.
This is a story that puts a grizzled ex-soldier and a tech prodigy right smack dab in the middle of a digital war zone.
I'm Julia, and I am ready to break this one down with you.
Yeah.
Ghostwire
Let's do it.
takes us on a wild ride, blending classic action with cutting-edge tech. We're going to see how these contrasting characters, Havoc and Sarah, have to bridge their worlds to stop a digital apocalypse.
Yeah, right from the start, we're thrown into this tense scene.
Yeah.
Sarah, our tech whiz, tracks down Havoc, a battle-scarred veteran in a remote cabin. It's like dropping a hacker into a survivalist's hideout.
Totally.
Havoc is so out of his element here.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of bullets and bombs, he's dealing with lines of code. What's his reaction to all of this?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Havoc's initial skepticism actually makes a lot of sense. Think about it. His entire life has been about physical conflict, tangible threats. Now he's confronted with this invisible enemy, this digital phantom. It's a clash of worldviews, a struggle to grasp the reality of this new kind of warfare.
It's like asking a knight to fight a ghost.
Exactly.
But I get the feeling Havoc isn't the type to back down from a challenge no matter how strange it seems.
Exactly. He may be out of his depth, but when he sees Sarah's work, he recognizes her brilliance, her potential. There's a grudging respect there, and understanding that they need each other's skills to survive this fight.
Okay, so we've got this unlikely duo forming, but who are they up against? Tell me about Ghostwire, this rogue hacker who's threatening global meltdown.
Ghostwire, Havoc has a military background.
Okay.
But he's gone rogue, aiming to dismantle the world's infrastructure, not for personal gain, but for pure chaos. He wants to watch the world burn, so to speak.
Talk about high stakes. This isn't some petty cybercrime. This is full-blown digital terrorism. But I'm curious, how does Havoc's past play into all of this?
That's where it gets really interesting. Because they both come from a military background, Havoc understands Ghostwire's mindset. He can anticipate the tactics, the strategies, the ruthlessness. It's like a chess match where both players know the other's opening moves.
So their shared history becomes a weapon in itself. I like it. So where do our heroes set up shop to combat this digital menace? Some high-tech bunker, maybe?
Not quite. Their war room is a gritty back alley garage. We see this constant juxtaposition of old and new Sarah's fingers flying across the keyboard, hacking her way through firewalls, while Havoc, all instinct and muscle memory, is setting up physical security.
A ballet brains and brawn, huh? But what's Sarah's plan? How do they stop a ghost in the machine?
She's got to play this smart.
Yeah.
Sarah figures out a way to lure Ghostwire out to trap him in his own code.
Okay.
It's brilliant but incredibly risky. There's this palpable tension that they know this could be a suicide mission.
And of course, just when things are getting interesting, it wouldn't be an action story without a little mayhem, right?
You bet. Just as Sarah's about to spring, her trap gunfire erupts outside.
Oh, no.
It's a diversion, a classic tactic to throw Havoc off balance, while Ghostwire focuses on breaking through Sarah's defenses.
I can just see Havoc going full-on action hero mode, holding off attackers, while Sarah races against the clock. It's a digital duel with real-world consequences. What happens next?
This is where Sarah's ingenuity shines. She turns Ghostwire's past against him. Remember that military background?
Yeah.
It turns out there's a trace of it, a signature embedded in his code, and Sarah weaponizes it. She uses his own history to trap him.
Now that's thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
So they got him right. It's over.
Hold on. It wouldn't be a good story if it ended that easily. Just as they think they've won Ghostwire triggers a failsafe.
Uh-oh.
A devastating attack that could plunge an entire continent into darkness.
Oh, talk about a last-ditch effort. So are they able to stop this digital doomsday device in time?
Just when all hope seems lost, Havoc bursts in. But he's not empty-handed. He's captured Ghostwire. Talk about a clutch play.
Wow. That's a serious power move.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling this victory isn't going to be without consequences.
You're right. This win comes at a price. Havoc, with a gun to Ghostwire's head, forces him to enter the abort code. They stop the blackout, but the lines they cross to get there, well, they're going to leave a mark.
This is what makes Ghostwire so compelling. It's not just about the adrenaline-pumping action. It's about the moral dilemmas, the choices that haunt you long after the battle's over.
Exactly. The story doesn't shy away from the messy reality of conflict, especially in a world where the battle lines are blurred between the physical and digital. It asks us to consider, What sacrifices are we willing to make, and what lines are we willing to cross to prevent catastrophe?
Welcome back to the Action Hero Podcast. We're knee-deep in the digital trenches of Ghostwire, exploring how this story merges high-octane action with the very real questions about warfare in our tech-driven world.
Before we went to break, we were talking about the aftermath of the victory.
Right. Particularly Sarah's request to Havoc. She wants to learn how to fight these new kinds of wars, the ones that blend the physical and digital. That says a lot about where their journey might be headed.
It does, and it also highlights a really interesting dynamic that runs throughout Ghostwire mentorship. You've got Havoc, a warrior forged in fire and steel, and Sarah, this digital prodigy. But it's not your typical teacher-student relationship.
What makes it different?
Usually the older, more experienced mentor imparts wisdom to the younger, less experienced student, right?
Right.
But here it's a two-way street.
Oh, I see. Sarah might need Havoc's tactical experience to navigate this cyber warfare landscape, but Havoc also needs Sarah's tech skills to even understand the battlefield.
Precisely. It's a brilliant showcase of how different skill sets, even seemingly opposing ones, can become strengths when combined. They each bring something unique to the table, and through their collaboration, they become more than the sum of their parts.
It makes you think about the importance of embracing different perspectives, especially in a world that's becoming increasingly complex. So where do they go from here? What happens after their victory over Ghostwire?
The story doesn't explicitly map out their future, but there are definitely some clues. Remember Sarah's request to Havoc?
Yeah?
That suggests their partnership is just beginning. This shared experience has forged a bond between them, and they're both aware that the fight isn't over.
Right. It's almost like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of a new one. They've proven they can work together, that they can overcome incredible odds, but the war against these digital threats, that's far from over.
Exactly. The threat of cyber warfare is constantly evolving. New enemies will emerge, new dangers will arise. And now you have this unlikely duo, Havoc and Sarah, standing on the front lines, ready to face whatever comes next.
It's an exciting prospect, isn't it? Imagining how their partnership evolves, how they adapt to new challenges. It makes you want to keep reading to see what happens next.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the action and the suspense, though. There's plenty of that. Ghostwire also makes us confront some hard truths about warfare in general and the sacrifices that sometimes have to be made to protect what we value.
That's true. This story doesn't shy away from the moral complexities. It shows us that victory, especially in this new kind of war, often comes at a cost, and sometimes those costs mean making tough choices. Choices that challenge our own sense of right and wrong.
And that's one of the things that makes Ghostwire so thought-provoking. It's not just a mindless action thriller. It's a story that sticks with you, that forces you to ask yourself, what lines are we willing to cross, and what are the consequences of those choices?
It's a story that feels very relevant to our times, where the lines between the physical and digital are blurring more and more every day, and the threats we face are becoming more complex and unpredictable.
Right. And Ghostwire reminds us that the heroes who protect us from those threats, they might not always be who we expect. Sometimes it's the unexpected partnerships, the individuals who come from different worlds with different skills who ultimately band together to face the darkness.
Ghostwire definitely raises a lot of interesting questions. But before we move on, I'm curious if you could sum up the essence of Ghostwire in just a few words. What would they be?
That's a great question. For me, Ghostwire is ultimately about adaptation. It's about recognizing that the world is changing, the battles are changing, and we need to evolve our thinking and our strategies to meet those challenges. And it's also about the power of collaboration, about recognizing that sometimes the most unlikely allies can become the strongest force for good.
Perfectly said. And that message of embracing change and finding strength in unexpected places, that really resonates with what we're trying to do here at the Action Hero Podcast. We want to explore stories that challenge our perceptions, that show us what heroism can look like in all its different forms.
Exactly, because in this digital age, the battlefields are evolving, and so are the heroes who fight on them.
We've got even more exciting insights to share with you about Ghostwire, so stick with us after this short break. And we are back for the final round of our Ghostwire analysis. This story really packs a punch, both in terms of action and the questions it raises.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts before we send our listeners out into the world, ready to face their own digital showdowns?
You know, one of the things that really struck me about Ghostwire is the visual contrast that the story uses.
You mean like how we start in that quiet, almost peaceful cabin,
Yeah.
and then we're suddenly thrown into this gritty, chaotic garage where they set up their digital war room.
Exactly. It's like the story itself is reflecting that clash between the analog and digital worlds, the old ways of doing things versus the new.
Yeah, it's almost like they're saying you can't escape the digital world no matter how far off the grid you go.
Right. And that visual contrast extends to the characters, too. You have Havoc, who embodies brute force instinct, the physicality of traditional warfare. And then there's Sarah, all about intellect strategy, this new era of cyber warfare.
Like a Wild West showdown, but instead of 6 shooters and saloons, it's laptops and firewalls.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that Ghostwire doesn't try to tell us which way is better. It doesn't say the old ways are obsolete or that the new ways are inherently superior. Instead, it forces us to consider both sides, to acknowledge the strengths and weaknesses of each.
It's like the story is saying that to truly win these new kinds of wars, we need to learn from both the past and the present.
Right. We need to adapt to find ways to combine the best of both worlds.
And what I think is really cool is that Ghostwire doesn't offer any easy answers.
Yeah.
It doesn't give us a clear-cut good guy and bad guy. It leaves us grappling with these moral ambiguities, forcing us to examine our own assumptions about conflict in this digital age.
It's a story that challenges us to think for ourselves, to confront the uncomfortable realities of a world where the lines between right and wrong, hero and villain, are constantly shifting.
And that's what makes it stick with you.
Yeah.
Long after you finish the story, you're still thinking about those choices, those sacrifices, the weight of those consequences.
Absolutely. Ghostwire is a masterclass in blending high-stakes action with thought-provoking themes. It's a story that will resonate with anyone who's ever wondered about the future of warfare, the impact of technology on our lives, and the choices we make when the world is hanging in the balance.
And we've explored a lot of ground here today, but we always want to hear from you, our incredible listeners. What stood out to you about Ghostwire? What resonated with you? What questions did it raise in your mind? Join the conversation on our socials, and let's keep this discussion going.
And remember, in this digital age, every day is a new battleground.
That's right.
Stay vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay action-packed.
That's it for this episode of the Execution Hero podcast. I'm Adrian signing off, and don't forget to rate and follow for more epic stories of adventure and carnage. Until next time, keep those fists clenched and those reflexes sharp.